Of all the human species that have ever walked the earth, perhaps none have captured our curiosity quite like the Neanderthals. They weren't just similar to us, they were incredibly close. So close, in fact, that many scientists refer to them as our sister species. And although they vanished tens of thousands of years ago, their DNA lives on in most of us today. Neanderthals are believed to have inhabited parts of Europe and Western Asia between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago. Much of their existence occurred during a period known as the Chaenian stage of the Pleistocene epoch, a time when Eurasia was colder and more dangerous than it is today. This was an era dominated by enormous Ice Age mammals like woolly mammoths, giant rhinos, and saber-toothed predators. Simply surviving in this environment required more than basic adaptability. It required a body built for hardship, and that's exactly what Neanderthals had. To begin with, their appearance wasn't drastically different from ours at a glance, but a closer look would reveal key differences. The most noticeable one would likely be their stature. On average, Neanderthals were shorter than modern humans by about 14 cm, or roughly 5.5 inches. However, this isn't to say they were small. Some individuals, such as the well-preserved Amud 1 specimen, stood around 1.78 meters tall, or 5 feet 10 inches. Interestingly, when compared to humans living in Europe around 20,000 years ago, Neanderthals were actually on par, or slightly taller. But while their height varied, their weight was consistently impressive. The average Neanderthal male weighed as much as 83 kilograms, 183 pounds, and females around 66 kilograms, 146 pounds, making them roughly 20% heavier than a typical Homo sapiens of the same height. This extra mass wasn't fat, it was pure muscle supported by incredibly dense bones. Virtually every bone in the Neanderthal body was thicker, heavier, and more compact than ours. In fact, some of their bones were twice as dense. Their frames were particularly bulky in areas associated with strength. Broad shoulders, thick femurs, muscular arms, and reinforced kneecaps. All of these traits point toward a life that demanded constant physical exertion. Many researchers believe they were significantly stronger than modern humans, a result of both evolutionary pressure and necessity. Their hunting style wasn't about long-range attacks or group traps. It involved face-to-face combat with large, dangerous animals using massive wooden spears. Rhinos, wild horses, bison, and even mammoths were on the menu. To pull off this kind of hunting, they needed powerful, reliable bodies. Some scientists estimate that a Neanderthal male could bench press over 500 pounds, roughly 200 kilos, without formal training. Females weren't far behind, potentially managing 350 pounds, about 160 kilos. That's stronger than most elite powerlifters today. Much of this strength is believed to have stemmed not only from their biology, but also from increased levels of natural hormones, perhaps even testosterone, that helped support muscle mass and recovery. But strength wasn't the only thing Neanderthals had in abundance. They also had resilience. Life was brutal, and injuries were common. One comprehensive study of Neanderthal skeletons found that between 79% and 94% showed signs of serious trauma that had completely healed. These weren't just minor cuts or broken fingers. We're talking blunt force fractures, crushed faces, lost limbs, and even deafness. One elderly Neanderthal individual had lost his right arm, suffered trauma to the left shoulder, and had injuries to the skull so severe that one eye was blinded, and both ear canals were closed off due to repeated bone growth, rendering him completely deaf. These injuries likely came from a combination of things: dangerous hunts, violent encounters with predators, and even fights with other Neanderthals. One study showed that about 74% of Neanderthals had survived violent animal attacks, with evidence pointing to encounters with big cats, wolves, and especially bears. What's remarkable is that these injuries healed, proof that Neanderthals not only endured, but took care of each other. Their skin and joints were also up to the task. Certain genes associated with Neanderthals point to thicker skin, denser hair, and stronger nails. Their joints were enlarged, allowing for intense physical movement and greater stress tolerance. Their hands were particularly interesting. While not necessarily larger, their thumbs extended at wider angles, and their fingertips were broader, suggesting a grip style focused more on strength than precision. Some scientists believe they may have lacked fine motor control in certain tasks, but they more than made up for it by being able to grip and manipulate objects with immense power. And their chests enormous. Neanderthals had barrel-shaped rib cages and significantly larger lungs than we do. On average, Their lung capacity was 20% greater, but in some extreme cases, it may have been up to 40% larger. One specimen, Kabara 2, may have had lungs that could hold 9 liters of air. For comparison, the largest lung capacity recorded in a modern athlete is around 8.5 liters. These powerful lungs helped fuel their heavy, muscular bodies and also enabled them to survive frigid environments. Cold weather animals, like the Neanderthal, tend to have faster metabolisms to retain body heat. That metabolic rate meant massive daily calorie requirements, anywhere from 4,500 to 6,700 calories per day, mostly from meat. Neanderthals also had large, wide noses that were likely adapted to help warm and humidify cold air before it reached the lungs. And while you might assume they were great long-distance runners based on their breathing power, they were actually built for bursts of speed, not endurance. Their short legs and long toes allowed for better ground contact and fast acceleration. But their narrow, long Achilles tendons were poorly suited for energy storage during long-distance running. In short, they were sprinters, not marathoners. Even their muscle fibers reflected this. Modern humans have a mix of fast-twitch and slow-twitch muscle fibers, fast for explosive movements, slow for stamina. Neanderthals had far more fast-twitch fibers, perfect for their quick, intense hunting style. But it wasn't all brawn. Neanderthals had brains to match. In fact, their brain cases were larger than ours, averaging 1,640 cubic centimeters in males and 1,160 in females, around 30% more than modern humans. However, brain size doesn't tell the whole story. Their brains were shaped differently, more circular and less developed in areas linked to higher-level abstract thinking. Instead, they dedicated more neural real estate to processing senses like vision and smell. This makes sense, considering they had unusually large eyes, estimated to be about 15% bigger than ours, giving them sharper vision, especially at night. Their heads were also shaped differently. They had large forward-projecting faces, long skulls, and huge jaws and teeth. While many believed these traits gave them incredible bite strength, newer studies suggest that their bite force was similar to the upper range of modern humans, about 700 newtons. So, while getting bit by one would definitely hurt, it likely wasn't catastrophic. Then why the oversized teeth and jaws? One theory is that their front teeth acted like a third hand. Some researchers suggest Neanderthals used their teeth to grip tools or animal hides, while their actual hands did the work. The wear and tear patterns on their teeth support this idea and differ significantly from those caused by chewing. Diet-wise, Neanderthals were hypercarnivores. Isotope analysis shows that roughly 70% or more of their calories came from meat, more than most modern humans, even the most committed carnivores. They also may have cooked and processed their food, which could explain some of their dental adaptations. So, what does this all mean for us? If you carry Neanderthal DNA, you might wonder, do you get some of these traits? More strength, resistance to cold, better vision? Probably not. So far, studies suggest Neanderthal genes in modern humans tend to have only subtle effects. They may influence things like pain sensitivity, immune responses, and even sleep patterns, but not superhuman strength or stamina. That said, the science is still evolving, and more recent research suggests their DNA may impact our internal systems more than we initially thought. The full story is still being uncovered, but one thing is clear: Neanderthals were remarkable beings, tough, powerful, resilient, intelligent, and deeply adapted to the unforgiving world they lived in. Though extinct, they're far from forgotten, and in a very real way, they're still with us.